Jeremy Wade, the quiet biologist who became the face of river monsters, just broke the silence at age 69. After years of mystery surrounding the show's abrupt end, he has finally explained what the network never aired. What he uncovered in the world's darkest waters wasn't just dangerous fish. It was something far more disturbing, something even he refused to keep chasing. Stay with me, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear changes everything we thought we knew about this show and what hides beneath river water. For years, fans accepted the simple explanation that river monsters ended because Jeremy Wade had finally caught every creature worth chasing. But newly surfaced comments from Wade at age 69 say something entirely different. In a recent sit-down, his first deeply reflective interview in years, Wade speaks with a calm tone that unsettles more than any wild river ever did. He reveals that the decision to end the show wasn't due to lack of content. It was due to what he started witnessing in the water. He explains that the true danger of those expeditions was never fully shown on television. The monsters remained real, he says, but the world around them began to disappear. He describes a shift that began in the final seasons. Trips returned to familiar rivers, but what once teemed with life now felt strangely empty. Entire stretches of river, where he had once filmed encounters, were lifeless. His team would travel thousands of miles only to find no sign of the species once believed to be unstoppable. Wade pauses before admitting that these absences deeply disturbed him. The legendary giants were not being captured less. They were actually appearing less. Fish don't retreat out of fear, he explains. They vanish because their environment failed. Wade clarifies that this was not an isolated issue. It was widespread, worsening, and impossible to ignore. Local accounts no longer spoke of river monsters attacking livestock. Instead, they spoke of fishing boats coming back empty. Communities that once survived off river systems were left fearing hunger rather than predators. Behind the camera, Wade says the silence of the river became the loudest warning of all. Standing in stagnant water that used to surge with danger, he realized the show had transformed into something darker, a record of decline, not discovery. And that's when he knew, even before the network did, that river monsters could not continue. Before Jeremy Wade became the man wrestling unseen predators from black water on television, he stood in front of chalkboards, not camera crews. He taught biology in classrooms across Kent, England, and later in far-off places like India and Sudan. He lived a life most people would call sensible: steady salary, stable routine, academic respect. Yet those who knew him closely say even then he looked out the classroom window more than he looked at his students. While others were preparing lesson plans, he was tracing river maps in his notebook margins, planning where he'd go as soon as school breaks began. Wade admitted in his recent interview that teaching was never his final destination, it was fuel. Every paycheck went directly into savings for flights to remote regions across South America, Africa, and Asia. Teaching paid the bills, he explained. Exploration fed the obsession. During holidays, he vanished into river systems most experts would never dare step into. He slept in canoes, rode in leaky wooden boats, and hiked miles through marshlands carrying only basic gear. He wasn't just fishing, he was collecting stories. Sitting beside elderly villagers, he filled entire notebooks with verbal accounts passed down through generations. Tales of unseen giants pulling livestock beneath the current, shadow creatures large enough to consume a child, even whispers of spirits said to possess river predators. Western analysts dismissed them as superstition, but Wade approached them as data. Every legend, he once wrote, begins with something someone saw. He returned to teaching each time with new pages of observations, but his connection to normal life faded. By the early 2000s, his colleagues noticed he rarely decorated his home or stayed long in one place. His bags stayed packed, his refrigerator often empty. One acquaintance later described him as a man living between airports and riverbanks. That hidden obsession, long building beneath the surface, would eventually spill onto television screens worldwide. But his private transition from quiet schoolteacher to relentless river tracker came with a price no one saw coming, one that would later threaten not only his career, but his life. Jeremy Wade always believed the most dangerous creature creatures he might ever face would rise from the water. He never expected one of the greatest threats to strike when he was nowhere near a river. In 2007, during an expedition deep in a remote region of South America, Wade contracted a severe case of malaria. No crew, no cameras, just him, alone in a small cabin with only his field notebooks, a cot, and a fever that pushed him to the edge of consciousness. For weeks, he faded in and out of awareness. He later admitted that he was too weak to lift a fishing rod, too fragile to even stand. "I thought that might be it," he said quietly, referring to the moment he genuinely believed the rivers had finally claimed him. But in that stillness, something unexpected happened. He could not move, but he could think. He read through old notes from expeditions across Amazon tributaries, African estuaries, and Asian deltas. He flipped through sketches of animals he had seen only once, through scribbled accounts of fishermen warnings that described creatures with armor like iron and eyes that didn't blink. And for the first time, he asked himself a question no one had asked. What if millions of people could see what I've seen before it's lost forever? That question ignited something. When he recovered, Wade stopped pursuing a quiet obsession. He turned it into a mission. He began sending concept ideas to production teams, explaining that the show would not be about fishing. It would be about solving mysteries, uncovering truths, and surviving what most consider impossible. It took 2 years of proposal revisions before River Monsters finally began filming. He often says malaria didn't just nearly kill him, it gave him clarity. The show was born in that silence. "If I had died then," Wade admitted recently, "every story I wrote would have vanished with me." And so, from the edge of life, he created a series that would take viewers to the edge of nature. But he had no idea that returning from that near-death moment would eventually place him right back in danger, this time with the whole world watching. When River Monsters premiered in 2009, audiences expected a fishing show. Instead, they were dragged into a high-stakes manhunt through the most dangerous waterways on Earth. They watched Jeremy Wade venture into blackwater tributaries haunted by myths, diving headfirst into waters where locals warned even boats refused to float. The first episode, chasing the notorious Arapaima in the Amazon, captured global attention. This wasn't fishing, it was a survival thriller disguised as documentary. Almost overnight, River Monsters became Animal Planet's highest-rated series, drawing millions of viewers each week. But rapid success brought something Wade never prepared for: escalation. As ratings soared, so did network expectations. Each season had to be riskier than the last, farther into inhospitable terrain, longer expeditions, bigger creatures, more shocking reveals. Gone were the days when Wade could quietly track legends with a notebook. Now, entire production teams followed him into malaria zones, conflict regions, and politically unstable areas. Budgets ballooned, not because the show was glamorous, but because danger required it. Insurance costs were staggering. Logistics were nearly impossible. On several occasions, the crew negotiated with local militias just to access filming location. The pressure extended beyond physical survival. Wade recalls being told after Season 3 that viewers wanted escalation. One executive reportedly said, "People don't tune in for fishing, they tune in to see you pushed." But pushing a man who already risked his health, safety, and sanity meant crossing invisible lines. The demands became relentless: harsher climates, deeper waters, longer shoots. There were no stunt doubles, no experts to step in. Everything hinged on Wade. Enduring realities, television wasn't built to show. He kept going, not for fame, but because every legend he uncovered hinted at extinction. "I wasn't chasing monsters," he later clarified. "I was racing against disappearance." But success had turned into an unrelenting enemy. The rivers were changing. The creatures were fading. And with every risk he agreed to take, Jeremy Wade stepped closer to becoming the final monster the wild would claim. As the seasons deepened and expectations climbed, the hunt that made Jeremy Wade a global icon began stripping him down piece by piece. What viewers saw were jaw-dropping encounters: giant stingrays dragging boats, electric eels capable of stopping a human heart, catfish powerful enough to snap bones. What they didn't see were the nights Wade slept in a fevered haze, hallucinating in remote jungle camps with no medical facilities for hundreds of miles. By season 6, he had contracted malaria not once, but twice. He battled parasitic infections that left him vomiting between takes. And in one off-camera moment, he reportedly collapsed mid-river and had to be revived before currents dragged him under. His most serious injury came during an Amazon shoot chasing a massive arapaima. The creature exploded from the water with such force that it struck Wade in the chest, knocking him unconscious and dislocating a rib. Production almost halted entirely. Many didn't realize he wasn't acting when he gasped for breath on camera. He was genuinely fighting to stay alive. And yet, after a few days of barely being able to stand, he returned to the water. "That's when I realized the river wasn't just testing me," he would later admit. "It was warning me." Physical danger wasn't the only threat. Wade was aging. By season 8, he was approaching his mid-60s, flying from the Himalayas to the Congo to Southeast Asia, with only days of recovery time in between. Every pressurized flight after a dive ran the risk of decompression consequences. Sleep became a distant luxury. His body bruised, his immune system weakened, and the malaria he suffered early in his career had lingering effects. Crew members noticed moments where he stared at the water in silence before filming, like he was weighing his life before casting the line. Off-camera, emergency evacuation teams began joining expeditions. Some crew members quietly quit, unable to withstand the mounting danger. But Wade refused to fake scenes or use doubles. If he couldn't catch the monster himself, there would be no episode. By the end of season 7, insiders believed it wasn't just Jeremy Wade finding river monsters, it was the river trying to reclaim one of its own. The turning point didn't come during a dangerous catch or a near-death moment. It came in silence. Season 8 was being filmed deep in the Mekong Delta, where Wade was tracking reports of a colossal freshwater stingray rumored to have dragged an entire boat beneath the water. The crew expected chaos and adrenaline. Instead, what they found was absence. The river that once teemed with life now felt eerily still. No splashes, no movement, not even birds calling overhead. Local fishermen told Wade quietly that they hadn't seen the creature in years. They pointed to nearby factories, drainage pipes, and stretches of water stained brown. "The monster is gone," one man whispered. "Not because we caught it, because we killed it." That sentence hit harder than any blow from the river. Wade realized the very ecosystems that made river monsters possible were collapsing faster than the show could document. He began noticing this pattern everywhere. Rivers in South America where children once swam were now toxic from runoff. African water sources he'd filmed in early seasons had turned into dry channels. Even the Amazon, his career's heartbeat, showed signs of irreversible damage. Species he'd studied were disappearing, not into the deep, but into extinction. His job had gone from uncovering secrets to watching the last survivors fade. Back in the United States, network executives pushed for more spectacular episodes, bigger captures, deeper waters, record-breaking visuals. But Wade refused to stage encounters or exaggerate risks. To keep going would mean compromising the truth, potentially injuring himself or worse, influencing copycat adventurers to risk their lives chasing legends that no longer existed. Late one night, while reviewing expedition plans in silence, Jeremy reportedly closed his notebook and said to a producer, "I think we've crossed the line. We went from investigating monsters to outliving them." He didn't make a public statement that day. He simply chose to walk away before nature made the decision for him. And that's when river monsters became history. Not because they ran out of fish, but because the river ran out of time. For years, Jeremy Wade remained loyal to the officially accepted ending of River Monsters, that they had simply run out of monsters to find. It was an elegant explanation, easy to digest, and it gave the show a dignified conclusion. But privately, Wade carried a much heavier truth. In a recent interview, for the first time, he admitted that wasn't the real reason the series ended. It was only the version that wouldn't panic people. The monsters weren't gone because we caught them. he said softly. They were gone because their world was gone. That's not an ending, that's a warning. He explained that the final few seasons of filming had changed tone. Expeditions that once felt like thrilling hunts began to feel like recovery missions, racing against time to show these creatures to the world before they disappeared entirely. Wade described moments where he'd release a fish back into the water and quietly wonder if anyone would ever see one again. He said it was difficult to celebrate captures, knowing survival was unlikely. Every time we wrapped an episode, I had this awful question in my head. Did we just film the last of its kind? The emotional burden didn't fade once cameras stopped rolling. Wade struggled with guilt that sharing these animals with the world may have unintentionally caused more harm than good. Tourism surged in some areas. Unregulated fishing increased, and fewer controls existed than people realized. The show was meant to protect, he said, but at times, I feared we had turned wild legends into trophies. He admitted his toughest decision was choosing not to expose the truth while the show was still airing. Talking openly about climate destruction, illegal poaching, or pollution would have invited backlash from sponsors, networks, even foreign governments. Instead, he waited until now. At 69 years old, Wade says he no longer cares who disagrees. We can't pretend the monsters just vanished into mystery. We made them disappear. That revelation stunned viewers. Thousands are now demanding investigations, calling this the most disturbing truth he's ever uncovered. And this time, it wasn't found underwater. Jeremy Wade said the decision to end river monsters wasn't made in a boardroom. It happened alone, knee-deep in dark water somewhere in the Mekong Delta. The cameras had stopped rolling for the night. Local fishermen were quietly packing their gear when one of them gestured to a section of the river where fish used to jump at dusk, but the surface stayed flat. Wade described hearing nothing, no splashes, no life, just silence. It hit me hard, not because we didn't catch anything, but because there was nothing left to catch. He said it felt like standing on a battlefield after the war, long after the soldiers were gone. That night, he reportedly sat by the riverbank writing in his notebook for hours. Not fishing notes, not filming plans, but questions. Questions about whether continuing would now be irresponsible. Was I documenting nature or filming its decline? The turning point came when a producer asked if they should revisit an older episode by staging what used to happen with local animals. Wade refused. He said in that moment, if the show needed to recreate the past to survive, then it no longer had a future. The next morning, he gathered his core team and told them that after this season, he was done. Some tried to persuade him to slow down rather than stop altogether. He said no. You don't negotiate with extinction, he told them. When it happens, it happens. You respect it. You don't exploit it. According to multiple crew members, several people cried, including some who had fought to keep the show alive for years. It wasn't sadness over their jobs ending. It was grief over what the world was losing. Jeremy kept filming, but only to close things properly. He approached the final episodes like a farewell tour, focusing on species that represented history rather than spectacle. Each time he lowered a line into the water, he described feeling the weight of all the rivers he had visited, and all the ones that may never recover. The monsters didn't defeat me, he said. The silence did. By the time the finale aired, fans thought the journey was ending because the story was complete. Now they're discovering the truth. It ended because the story was running out of pages. Today, at 69 years old, Jeremy Wade speaks with a tone that feels less like a television presenter and more like a witness giving testimony. He no longer hides behind the calm narration of a documentary host. In recent appearances, he states plainly that the waters he once explored are in crisis. The monsters didn't vanish into legend, he says. We pushed them out. We poisoned what kept them alive. Now, nature is going quiet, and quiet is far more terrifying than any creature I ever chased. Wade says that when River Monsters first aired, the goal was to track down myths and prove whether the legends held truth. He wanted to show that science science and storytelling could coexist. But over time, the mission changed. Instead of just documenting creatures believed to be dangerous, he began documenting danger itself: the rising temperatures, shrinking habitats, illegal fishing operations, and chemical contamination that slowly suffocated rivers. "We were chasing horror stories," he explained. "Turns out the real horror was what humans were doing to the water." Since stepping away from the show, Wade has launched educational projects, small conservation drives, and collaborations with local river communities, work that receives far less attention than his television career. He has turned down multiple network offers to reboot River Monsters, refusing to sensationalize or replicate an ecosystem that no longer exists. "I won't turn extinction into entertainment," he said. "If we make another show, it will be about restoration, not reaction." But the most chilling part of his confession is this: he believes the disappearance of river giants is only the beginning. He warns that rivers act as nature's warning systems. When the monsters go silent, the water soon follows. Then the species around it, and eventually humans. "We thought we were looking at legends," Wade whispers. "What we were really seeing was the future." And now, for the first time, he's asking the world to listen before that silence reaches every shore. If you found this shocking, don't forget to subscribe. This story is just the beginning. What Jeremy Wade is saying next might be the most unsettling revelation yet.